The next panel will be moderated by Brian Halweil, who has been a longtime friend here at the New School. He's definitely a leader here in the local food movement and writes on social and ecological impacts of how we eat. He's the editor of Edible East End and co-publisher of Edible Brooklyn and Edible Manhattan magazines. He's also senior fellow at the World Watch Institute, where his work has focused on organic farming, biotechnology, hunger, and there he co-directs the Nourishing the Planet project. He's the author of Eat Here, Reclaiming Homegrown Pleasures in a Global Supermarket. He writes from Sag Harbor, New York, where he and his wife tend a home garden and an orchard. Brian, if you can introduce the panel and our panelists. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Fabio, for the introduction, and thanks, everyone, for attending. We're still waiting on one of our speakers, but we'll start without him, and he can join the discussion if he gets here. The context for this part of the panel might begin with an event that I was at last night, the James Beard Foundation Awards, which is sort of a who's who of people in the New York and national food and drink media business. A lot of cookbook publishers and magazine publishers and even people outside of the traditional food magazine business are there because more and more people are interested in writing about food. And the James Beard Foundation, which started, its origins were partly with an appreciation of regional cuisine in America. James Beard was one of the first people to recognize that America did have very important traditional and regional culinary traditions. The organization itself, it became very clear last night, is struggling with a marketing problem. They're an institution. They have literally tens of thousands of members in New York City and beyond, and yet they feel, if you speak to people in the foundation, that they're behind the curve in terms of sustainability issues, in terms of thinking about local and regional food. They announced last night all sorts of sustainability awards for the first time. Articles on environmental issues were recognized, books on environmental issues, books on food policy, nutrition, topics that traditionally the James Beard Foundation didn't recognize. And yet, if you looked at what was served during the meal, during the awards dinner itself, there was a tremendous disconnect between the concept of recognizing sustainability in writing and what we were served on our plates, including an absence of New York tap water at a time when one of the articles that was nominated was about the incredible New York City tap water system. So organizations, farms, food distributors, people in the food and drink business sometimes struggle with these sorts of marketing issues. It happens when businesses scale up, and they're not necessarily able to adhere to principles of sustainability. And it happens also because it's difficult to hold on to origin as you scale up as an organization, as a farm, as a business. And so perhaps that's something we can keep in mind as we hear from these three speakers. I just wanted to introduce each of them and ask them a question and begin a discussion that way. And I wanted to start with the farmer on the panel, Zaid Kurdieh. Pardon me. Zaid Kurdieh is the farmer at Norwich Meadows Farm, which is in Chenango County, New York, about 225 miles north of here. The farm produces organic fruits, vegetables, and poultry. The farm serves primarily through a CSA that has over 600 household members in New York City and upstate. They sell at a number of Greenmarkets in the city and a number of upstate markets. And before becoming a farmer full-time, Zaid worked at Cornell Cooperative Extension. So he's also been involved not just with his own marketing on the farm, but marketing ideas and concepts to other farmers. And Zaid, I guess I would ask you, you've been a full-time farmer since 2003, and I guess I'm curious how the emphasis you've had to put on marketing has evolved. You sell directly, it sounds like, the majority of your produce, and I'm sure in the last 10 years your customer base has evolved in terms of their knowledge and Well, you know, they often say that farmers struggle because producing is one thing and marketing is a whole other thing. It's really two people that you need to run a farm. And so I'm curious what emphasis you put on marketing and how it's evolved in the recent history of your farm.
Well, from day one when we started our farm, we knew that marketing was almost more important than production because with my background, having worked with farmers and worked with USDA and so on, I mean, the missing link for farmers was always the marketing piece. So from day one, that was our emphasis is, okay, who do we sell our product to? And that in itself has evolved over time because when we started with literally half an acre, and now we're up to about 55, 60 acres of highly intensive production. So we produce a lot of stuff. And what we knew from day one that our emphasis in terms of marketing, it was going to be organic, quality, and service. Organic, because we believe in organics. I mean, I studied agriculture and I've been a student of agriculture ever since I was a kid. So that's the reason for that. Service is sort of because of our background, where we like to work with people. And we believe that when we're marketing, we need to market a product honestly and so that people know what they're getting. And we also knew that education was going to be a big part of that because I wanted to sell items that were not familiar to most people, such as, at the time, Persian cucumbers 10, 15 years ago were unheard of. People really didn't know what they were. They looked like zucchinis, you know, and so you need to actually introduce items, and we still do that. We do a lot of products, and now we work with a different set of folks. We work with the chefs a lot, and we introduce Middle Eastern items or other items that we learn about and we grow. And so marketing, number one. Production, definitely a problem. It's much more problematic than marketing in that, just to give you an example, this year, we haven't even been able to get into our fields as of yet. It's very wet, very cold, and the bio that I sent, I think, is a few years old, so we actually now also produce in New Jersey. We're renting land about 50 miles from here, and we actually have over 1,000 CSA members, and our markets we quit doing pretty much most of our upstate markets. We have a small CSA upstate, and it's primarily because folks here in the city really have a much higher appreciation for local than, unfortunately, the folks upstate. Because a lot of them have gardens, and a lot of them are already sort of local in that they have means to get some of the local produce that's up there.
So, I mean, just to go a little bit deeper, I mean, in some ways, marketing decisions and your evolving market drive your production decisions. I mean, I suspect you're renting land in New Jersey because it gives you a jump start on the Hudson Valley growing season, and then again, you can get into your markets earlier. And I mean, again, it's something you have a little more control over in some ways than production.
Yes, definitely. Also, I mean, the other thing that drove us out of New York is there's a couple of legal maybe. There's talk about making farmers pay time and a half in New York. If that happens, it's going to basically ruin agriculture in New York State because there's only one other state that has a time and a half in the union, which is California, and it's after 60 hours. So we're kind of keeping our, I don't want to lose my farm, so it's another reason. Plus, I'm running out of acreage. Good vegetable acreage is not easy to come by in our area, and this puts me much closer to our markets, and yes, and it extends our season. Plus, they have a commodity in New Jersey that we are short on, which is called that yellow thing in the sky, that it appears more often in New Jersey than it does in Norwich, New York, so.
Well, maybe to jump to the end of the table to Liz Carollo, who's the head of special programs at the the head of the publicity manager at the Greenmarkets throughout New York City. She oversees at-market activities, partnering with various New York City health and wellness focused organizations, enhancing the marketplace at each of the green markets each week, including publicizing what should be on your shopping list, spreading the word via social media, and doing all the sorts of things that it takes to get people to market and make them better shoppers. And if you think about Zaid's situation where, you know, the farmer has to devote a certain amount of mental energy to marketing, not just producing, in some ways you and the other Greenmarket managers and employees take a little bit of burden off the farmers in the sense that you're trying to do as much marketing as possible, not just by setting up a Greenmarket, but encouraging shoppers to go there and what to buy. So curious also again in your, you know, how marketing has been evolving, not just for your job personally, but Greenmarkets in general. I mean, I think Greenmarkets has gotten much more sophisticated in the last 5 to 10 years in terms of marketing, thinking about promoting particular products, matching up products, having chefs demos, and I wonder how that's been and where you see that going.
Sure. I mean, the foundation of what we do is provide space, you know, work through the various city bureaucracies to get permits and set up. We're going to have 53 markets this year and make sure the space is safe and clear for the farmers to come in, and then we turn it over to promotions. So in the last few years, we have ramped that up quite a bit because we kind of got it down. We know how to navigate those bureaucracies, get the permits, and we have enough staff now, and we work really hard at training our market managers, who I think clearly are the most untapped resource in the market. They have to kind of manage everything from Con Ed wanting to dig into the space to 2 hours later teaching customers how to cook with kohlrabi. And they are our eyes and ears in the market, and I think that customers should really utilize them more because they are the ones that talk to each farmer every day. They know what produce is coming in. They do special events out of their stand, and they, you know, promote different farmers every day, and they do cooking demos and have special events and have, you know, community groups come in and table. But that's just at the market. Outside of the market, we started an educated eater series, so we're listening to our customers, find out what they want to know more about. You know, everything from labeling to multi-generational family farms to our local fisheries. This year coming up, we have one on land preservation, one on our new farmer development project, which works with immigrants who have moved here and have a background in agriculture and want to lease land, eventually buy and sell to the market. So on top of that, 7 Facebook pages and 3 Twitter accounts, and we're doing the whole social media thing, and that's really important, and that gives us a lot of exposure and an opportunity to connect directly with our customers on a regular basis, and I think our customers really love that. And because our markets, and there's 53 of them, and I have never, ever in this job been able to look at them as a whole. I mean, we are a system and network, but the only way to approach my job is to look at the markets individually, because some markets are 3 stands and rely on commuters going from their house to their office and picking up something really quickly, and how do you reach those people while they're in the market? And some are markets where families come and bring their kids and their dogs and they hang out for 3 hours. So you have to have kids activities and you have to have music, and we really look at the markets individually and then decide at that point how to promote them and, engage the customer and hopefully, take the burden off the farmers. But I'm really happy that Zaid is actually the producer that's here, because he does such a stellar job of diversifying his product and, adding pickled products a few years ago and doing CSA shares. And so the farmers, I don't know. The farmers, they have to do it to a certain point, though. I mean, the farmers have to be listening to their customers and, listening to chefs, see what chefs want to buy, but mostly, having that face-to-face interaction and creating that loyal customer base, having good signage, having a nice product.
And do you give them feedback? And
all the time, right. So that's another thing that, we train our market managers. We just hired our 25 seasonal staff, and they go through, it starts next week. That's why May is really fun. We do a really intensive 3-week training with all of our seasonal managers, so they can learn everything about who we are and what we do and how to be the face of the market and how to, it's funny because a lot of our producers, do a really good job of marketing. I mean, over 60 of our producers have Facebook pages now. 25 have Twitter accounts, and are really pretty savvy, especially the younger farmers that are just buying land and they kind of get it. Second, career farmers tend to get it, lawyers that are decided to buy a farm, that kind of thing. And yeah, it's just a matter of thinking ahead and constantly communicating with your customer base. Yeah.
Well, the third speaker who was going to be here is Peter Miller, who's a dairy farmer with Organic Valley, which is one of the oldest and the largest cooperative of organic farmers in the United States. And one of the reasons that we invited him is because Organic Valley, in its 30-year history, because it's scaled up from just a small number of dairy farmers in the Midwest to a few thousand now in every region in the United States. They've confronted many of these marketing issues of, how do you retain quality and control over standards as you scale up. And also they felt as though over time they lost a certain connection to community. And so about 10 years ago they did something very interesting where they were a national cooperative and then they broke themselves back down into smaller regional entities. And so if you shopped in a grocery store in California, the container of Organic Valley milk said, from our California growers for our California consumers. And here in the Northeast, it would say, from our Northeast growers for our Northeast consumers. And then last year, they actually launched for the first time a state-based label, New York Fresh, which is sold exclusively in New York City and exclusively from their New York dairy farmers and bottled in the state. This cost them money to do, and it took them a lot of logistical experimentation to figure out how to do that, but they've, as part of their mission as a company, they've wanted to do it. And so I think Peter could have brought a pretty interesting example of how you deal with a big bulk commodity and still retain some sort of local and regional identity and how you market it effectively. And the latest statistics I've seen, they are beginning to eclipse Horizon Organic Dairy, which is sort of their other big competitor and who's not been able to retain that origin in a large way. But speaking of commodities, our last speaker is John Moore, who's the vice president at Dallis Coffee. He's in charge of sales and previously did a lot of the sourcing of the coffee. Now, the coffee is a commodity, as John was just saying, that is second only to water in terms of what we drink on this planet, and second to oil in terms of value of international trade of a commodity. And yet Dallis Brothers, which is one of New York City's oldest roaster in Ozone Park, Queens, has evolved as a company where even though they're dealing with a bulk international commodity, they're much more involved in the sourcing and the origins, the unique regional varieties that they're now serving. And then once it gets to New York, once the coffee gets to New York and they roast it, there's an even finer level of differentiation in terms of their actual blends and roasts that go to everyone from bodegas to universities and top restaurants in New York City. So, John, I'm interested in how, from a marketing perspective, Dallis Coffee has evolved. I mean, you're at a pretty cool time because it's sort of like we're in the third wave of coffee, right? Starbucks was the second wave, and now we're past Starbucks, and where people don't want something anonymous like they get at Starbucks. There's a bit more of a...
Anybody work for Starbucks out there?
There's a bit more of a story behind it, and I think the marketing issues, opportunities, and challenges you struggle with parallel in many ways what Zaid and Greenmarket farmers deal with on a local and regional level.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that. I should confess I'm a sales and marketing person. I really appreciated our executive chef from the first session saying, he's an executive chef by trade, business person by necessity. I was the person who was sort of sourcing all of the green coffees, responsible for roasting the green coffees. So I really have a passion for that side of it. And then when the person who was really driving the sales and marketing messaging for the company left abruptly, it's like, well, if you can't sell really good coffee, you can't source really good coffee. So I ended up kind of sliding into that role. Dallis Brothers is a really interesting New York City sort of iconic roaster, interesting story. I don't know, how many people in the room have heard of Dallis Brothers Coffee before? Oh, awesome, nice. That's better than usual. I think that we're in a really interesting time in the New York City coffee scene. How many people in the room have heard of Intelligentsia? That's what I thought. Counterculture? Okay. Yeah, those guys aren't from here. They've only been here a couple of years. It's pretty amazing to me. And I used to work for one of them, I should say. So I have a real appreciation, and we're sort of a brotherly community. But what's amazing is that New York City has been the epicenter of coffee since the inception of this country. If you can imagine, this was a Dutch settlement, not a British settlement originally. The Dutch drank coffee. The Brits drank tea. So you can imagine the first official beverage of New York City that didn't involve alcohol was coffee. We've got a long history in coffee. All of the bulk of the green coffee, the unroasted coffee that comes in from all over the world, the epicenter of trade for coffee in North America is New York City. A lot of people think that this is a phenomenon that bled over from Seattle. Not so, I say. For hundreds of years, it's been coming out of this little hub right here in Manhattan. To this day, New York City, the Port of New York, New Jersey, handles literally hundreds of millions of tons of green coffee each year. It flows through. In the 1800s, one city alone challenged New York for supremacy in coffee, and that was New Orleans. They hit a little bump with the Civil War, and ever since, New York really has reigned supreme. I say all that because it's interesting. New York City, for all its vibrance and importance in the world of coffee, really kind of fell asleep at the wheel, I have to say. Roasters like, we had a really nice cup. I don't know if you guys have had anything from the urn of Gillies coffee over there. Donald Schoenholt's great. Again, another old, iconic New York City roaster, been in Brooklyn for decades. And Donald will probably fess up and tell you he's a little bit guilty, as Dallis Brothers was. We sort of fell asleep with an old paradigm. It's been interesting to hear talk of distribution channels. Dallis has been roasting and distributing for almost 100 years now. The paradigm of the past is the coffee is sort of like if you've ever had table wine at a restaurant where they claim to have their own secret recipe. Coffee had been like that until very recently here in New York. So you would go to a restaurant, usually they wouldn't tell you where they got it. If you said, oh, that's a great cup of coffee, they're like, thanks. Yeah, that's our coffee, that's our blend, we love it. It was only the last couple of years when someone would say, oh yes, well, we use Dallis Brothers, that's a single origin estate from the Alta Mogiana region of Brazil, from Finca Nossa Senhora Aparecida. How do you like the peanutty tones in the finish? This is a new phenomenon. And it's kind of an exciting new time for coffee everywhere. And there's a lot of, again, infrastructure that's supporting all of that. Things are happening in origins where coffee is being produced. Things like the Cup of Excellence, or you have barista competitions, you have consumption at origin going up. These are all really exciting trends in coffee that then allow us access to coffees and quality coffees in ways we've never seen before. So that when someone talks about that peanutty finish, you might really actually get it. It's not just some marketing guy conjuring up flavor notes for you. So that's a very exciting thing. Now, in New York, the old school roasters were sort of used to the traditional distributor model. They were always the guy behind the guy behind the guy. So if somebody from Gramercy Tavern comes to visit us in Ozone Park, Queens, and says, hey, I'd really like to create this beautiful blend for my customers because they're getting this grass-fed beef from a wonderful Hudson Valley farm. They're getting milk from a wonderful local farmer. The tomatoes, they just plucked off the stand across the street. And someone would ask about the coffee. They'd be like, oh, that's our coffee. Yeah, we designed that blend. And they wouldn't tell you where they got it. And now these days, they actually put the name of the roaster on the menu. They put the farm itself on the menu. But that's new. And folks from out of town copped on to those trends before the New York City guys, to be honest. And so we were forced to play a little catch-up. Another challenge facing the iconic New York City roasters is that we're old. And how do you reposition old? The thing about old is that it should mean the things like competence, experience. It should mean that you've been around the block a little bit. You have all of these contacts. You know all of these folks. You've seen all the challenges, and you've come up with solutions for decades. So I should be a great, viable business partner for you. The challenge is you're not hip, fun, exciting, fresh, new. You're not the latest story unless you grab that story and recreate it. And so that's one of the challenges that we've faced at Dallis Brothers over the past few years. Again, it's a really fun, interesting time in coffee, but imagine Dallis Brothers was really evolving over time. So that meant we had a customer in the Bronx that's been working with us for 60 years who calls up, and guess what? He doesn't want to hear me wax poetic about blueberry tones that I'm getting out of my Yirgacheffe arrival that's coming from the Koke mill and is a natural process that took 72 hours, done by hand. He doesn't care. He's like, yo, John, where's my coffee? It's got to taste, like my grandfather's tasted. He doesn't want to hear about these nuanced tones. But Dallis Brothers had to do the right thing by this person, had to give them the coffee. And by the way, in the 80s, Hazelnut Snickerdoodle Supreme was huge. These days, you're really not current or cool if you're working with flavors. But guess what? We've had customers for 30 years. Am I too cool for school now? Am I not going to provide that customer with the same service that customer's come to rely upon for 30 years? Because that's a trend that kind of fell out of favor about 10 years ago? I don't know. I'm not really that kind of guy, and we're not really that kind of company. So how do we manage that? Because all of a sudden, if I'm not pouring triple Rosettas or other fancy little designs in every cup that's going out the door in a retail establishment, if I haven't provided cutting-edge training to someone else to get that service, I'm kind of obsolete. If I can't tell you the names of the farmers' kids in Kenya, all of a sudden, I'm irrelevant. Okay? And if I don't do that, let's say I do that for someone, and I actually grab that account, and I've heard this, by the way. If I'm serving a third wave coffee shop, which is a conversation for a whole nother time, and I'm serving a diner or a deli or a bodega, and somebody sees the same branded box, all of a sudden there's a huge conflict. That guy, he sells bodegas. Yeah, sure, he has Gramercy Tavern as a key account, but what do they know? He's also selling that bodega up the block. And from a branding perspective, we got a problem. Right? We got a bit of an identity crisis. So the very strength of New York City's fabric, this idea of, hey, we're sort of this melting pot. We've got folks from all over the world, coffees from all over the world, going out in different permutations to concepts all over the city. That should be a strength, right? That's something that only somebody with a lot of experience can manage. It's not easy having chops in all these distinct fields. It's easy to do one thing and do it really well, but can you do multiple things? All of a sudden we faced a real challenge there. So we actually split the brand. We've got a 100-year-old company, but we've actually recently, over the last 18 months, subdivided our brand and what we do so that we can hit these different markets. And instead of being everything for everyone, we've decided to be exactly what we need to be in each distinct market segment. So on the one hand, if you see, and this involved a whole slew, I don't know how interested the marketing side of this is for you guys, but there are a whole lot of things that then spin out of this decision. So all of a sudden you're talking packaging, you're talking branding, you're talking an entire brand story per segment. And not only that, we also continue to do work where someone like a Union Square Cafe wants to sell their blend with their name on it, and we totally respect that. So there were a lot of complicated and complex things that went into working in coffee the way we do now. And it's a very exciting thing. When it comes to just the marketing side and bringing that message to the end consumer and market, there too, I think the social media piece it's a new phenomenon in the coffee market where in the retail sector, I mean, you guys can imagine most baristas are not 55 years old in this city. They're usually between the ages of 18 and 22 to 25. The management teams in cafes and restaurants might stretch up to 30, 35. But this is a very tech-savvy community. This is a very, very Like, what have you done for me yesterday, community? The news is flying, and sentences aren't finished, and they're tweeting back and forth, finishing sentences for one another. So that's been new for us. We've, again, we've had to really adapt with the times. We do have the Twitter account. We have the Facebook account. We're engaging with multiple communities because we were just joking earlier about having like a taste-off for diner coffee. I think that'd be a lot of fun in that segment because we get so hoity-toity about our high-end stuff. We forget that a lot of coffee that gets consumed in this city is consumed in diners and delis and bodegas. And you know what? People like a good cup of coffee. So it'd be nice to have a little taste-off. But at the same time, we're thinking of radical things like opening a retail site. We've never had a retail shop before, but end consumers, you don't know Dallis Brothers, but you know some of these other names because they have shops. And more than ever, people that are buying for institutions like New School, like NYU, like Columbia, the purchasing agents are younger than they were before. They're being swayed by word of mouth, what's going on in the market. That's street level stuff. When you have your own retail site, like you guys experience as farmers with the farmers markets, you can actually be there in front of people serving your product the way you want it served, giving recommendations for folks who will then take your product, take it home and produce something. If they screw it up, they're not going to blame themselves, they're going to blame you. That's certainly true in coffee. So if we have a retail site, then we have a place where we can actually have a meaningful exchange with end consumers. Totally had to relaunch a new website. First time that had been done, the old one had like a vision of a guy on a donkey for about 20 years. It was brutal. That was the landing page, and that was about it. Now we've got a very vibrant page. We've had to rethink how we do that. You're getting blog updates now. We're fortunate. We have a sister company in Brazil with a farm. So we're fortunate. We give updates from our own farm. We try to get people, we're taking people to our farm. We're trying to really engage with folks. So we've definitely had to rethink the wheel, blow the dust off the old brand and kind of reintroduce it as a new brand. And we're still in the process.
So, I mean, you've had to change your mindset. Each individual in your company, from your salespeople on the street in different neighborhoods, have had to rethink their pitch. Mm-hmm. You obviously want both those customers that you're talking about. The customer you've had for 30 or 50 years, but, I mean, partly what we're talking about here is expanding the market, scaling up. So, I don't know, how do you juggle those two distinct customers? How do you juggle the devout Greenmarket grower who knows everything already, you don't have to explain anything to them about cooking, and the Greenmarket novice who is, concerned that, man, is stuff more expensive here, I don't know how to cook with this stuff. If our goal is expanding the market for local and regional food, or in the case of coffee that's sourced properly, that's Rainforest Alliance certified, and even your different brands, those are all sourced the same way from similar farms, even though the blends are different. How do you juggle those sorts of things? How do you entice that new customer without losing the old, devout customer? Hopefully
The farmer is keeping the old customer coming back. I think that we have a rule at Greenmarket that the farmer themselves has to be at the stand at least once a month, and for most of our stands, it's a lot more than that. And there is nothing more important than that face-to-face interaction for the customers that have been going for 30 years and the new ones. They want to talk to the grower, or they want to talk to someone who works on the farm, or a knowledgeable salesperson. They want to know how to cook something they've never seen before. And I think we can, Facebook and Twitter all we want, but nothing is more important than that. And again, having the on-site market manager there to field questions and explain why not everything is organic, and why we're not there 7 days a week, or any of the other questions that our customers regularly have. So.
Are there big marketing opportunities that you feel that you're missing as business owners or farmers? For instance, Greenmarket has lots of connections to kids in New York City, school kids. Tour groups come in, and now you're doing stuff in schools. Mm-hmm. That seems like a very important population to market to, right? They're the eaters of tomorrow. Are there others that you're missing or that you're planning to approach?
Well, I mean, we have a number of initiatives right now where, like in Bed-Stuy last month, we put in 5 refrigerators. So they are basically like the Pepsi soda refrigerator you see when you walk into a bodega, and it's now filled with juice pressed on a nearby farm, and by the end of May, produce, right now apples. So as produce starts coming in. So we have like Shayna was here talking about in the last panel, the wholesale market in the Bronx, and it's called the Yum Food Box program that runs out of the Isabella Center in Fort Washington, where we provide boxes of produce that are affordable to seniors that live there, and just always looking for new ways to distribute food, especially in neighborhoods that won't support a traditional market, 15 stands. And we're always trying to be creative and think about ways to expand that, in dynamic ways. Yeah.
To kind of emphasize what has been said, I mean, we hear from farmers at the green markets that their sales in the last few years have dropped up to 30–40%. And while our sales have not, even in the economic downturn, we have not seen a downturn. It's still going up. And a lot of it is the lack of innovation, the lack of really contact with that customer. And I'm very lucky to have a wife who's an excellent cook and a person that really likes to work with people. And that is definitely a magnet. And because you have to, what do we do with this okra? How do you cook this? How do you cook that? We take the time to work with people. We actually visit customers in their homes. We've been here long enough to where we've seen people pass away, unfortunately. We've seen new generations being born. So that making those connections is vital for our business. And that's the way we want to run our business. We're not selling a commodity. We are selling branded items that when you take that tomato, you kind of conjure up the image of the farmer who actually planted it and the care that has gone into growing it.
And the more information, the better. I mean, you're sort of, you mentioned organic as one of the labels attached to your product. I mean, you have a variety of certifications, not to mention, the name of the farm, the name of the farmer that goes along with a particular blend of coffee. Yeah, well, sort of not to cut this off, but maybe we'll take some questions from the audience. Any questions for the panel? Yes.
I have a question, sort of the perception that often farmers markets and this sort of way of eating is often considered a bit elite sometimes and expensive and such. How do you deal with that from a marketing perspective in order to reach a broader audience beyond the people that already are thinking local and sustainable and such, which we obviously all in this room are things that we go to these meetings and learn about these kinds of things and exchange ideas, but how do you go beyond that kind of audience and expand to people that are going to perhaps not have as much information about this?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
About 40% of our customers are CSA customers, and by default, the CSA customer is a person who wants the organic or they want that connection, but they don't want to spend the dollars that they spend at the farmer's market. So we've sort of, we're to some extent, we are segmenting our market, kind of like they're doing with the coffee. But there is issues with that, and we've seen, we've had some of our CSA's customers come to our stand and say, well, how come the tomatoes at the stand look better than the tomatoes we get? Mm-hmm. And so you have to explain to them, well, look, as part of the CSA thing, it's the same tomatoes, except I actually hire a person to sit there and sort of rub them off and keep them looking really nice at the stand. It's the same tomato, but the one you get might have a little bit of dirt on it or a speck or something. So that has been an issue that but now with the communication, the website, and I've embraced this stuff that, I've got a phone and I take pictures and I upload it to my website. That has actually gone a long way to kind of bridge that gap of, why does this look better or so on. So we are always looking at, what's new in the market, where to focus. We're a farm. The problem with farms is, we had a flood this year that was about as bad as the 2006 flood where we lost half of our crop. We lucked out this year. We didn't have anything planted because it was too wet. So we're always fighting the weather, and so we're always looking for ways to add value to what we sell.
Just from a coffee person's perspective, I have to defend Starbucks for a second. One of the things that they take a lot of flack about, I can't tell you how many times I've heard, oh my goodness, I go to Starbucks, I drop $6 on a coffee drink. It's unbelievable. And I applaud them for driving those prices higher. And it's almost, coffee, if it's not, great coffee isn't appreciated enough for what it is. I can go anywhere in the city right now and get a deplorable bottled glass of generic beer and pay $8 to $9 for it. I can then turn around and buy at a cafe with a barista who's painstakingly pouring for 6 minutes a single origin coffee from a farm where we know the farmer went above and beyond doing everything they needed to do. And they face when you talk to farmers, it's always amazing, or visit with farmers, it's always great because whether it's here or in El Salvador, many of the challenges are the same. And I was at a farm where a farmer won the Cup of Excellence, which is sort of like Powerball in the Olympics rolled into one for a coffee farmer. 1 year, and in 3 hours lost about 85% of his harvest the next year in a windstorm. Just came out of nowhere. And the reality is, I hear people bark about coffee prices. I know in this neighborhood nearby, Joe the Art of Coffee, Cafe Grumpy, we're friends. We're a small community. Grumpy had a cup, I think, going for $10 recently. And it hit the New York Times. People were like, oh my goodness, cup of coffee, $10. Unthinkable. These elitist pigs, what are they doing? What are they thinking? You got to start somewhere. The reality is, until people put a value on the work and the passion that goes into producing these things and can actually appreciate them for what they are, as distinctly different from something coming out of a can pre-ground that's been sitting there for 1.5 years, that is a commodity, that's treated as a commodity and should be appreciated as a commodity. But the stuff that isn't has to be repositioned fundamentally in how we consume things. Coffee gets it rough because we went through decades with the bottomless cup phenomenon or the brown water phenomenon. During the Depression, people would forego food and drink really cheap, watered-down cups of coffee. Post cereal, by the way, started out a coffee substitute called Postum because they were trying to find a cheaper alternative to brew grains that would produce something that tasted remotely like coffee because it wasn't cheap enough already. So we've commoditized as a culture coffee, and I think it's the same for turnips or beets or corn or soy or many of these other crops, foodstuffs. You can get really cheap, mass-produced stuff, and you'll pay the appropriate price for it. I think the challenge is getting people to pay the appropriate price for the alternative. So.
For us, as an organization that represents over 230 producers, it is our biggest misconception. And truly, you can walk into the market and find microgreens, that you can go to Union Square right now and find microgreens for $40 a pound, and you'll be able to find heirloom tomatoes for $5, sometimes $6 a pound come this summer. But when it comes to the staples, onions, potatoes, carrots, not heirloom tomatoes, regular tomatoes, those prices are comparable, if not cheaper, than at a grocery store, and the flavor is 1,000,000 times better. When we piloted our EBT food stamp program in 2005, at 4 markets, we brought in $1,000 in EBT sales that year. And then in 2009, at I think it was 27 markets, we brought in $250,000. 4 years later, last year we brought in over $500,000. If we double that again, we're going over $1 million in food stamps at the farmers market, and that's And I know at Union Square you can find prices driven up a little bit, and you can also walk over there right now and pretty much crowd surf from the south end of Union Square to the north end. It's packed, and there's a lot of it's a marketplace, but it doesn't really represent our 52 other markets that serve the communities that they're in. And yeah, I think that we do a pretty good job of keeping the food, the best food you're going to find in the city at a decent price. Yeah.
Yes,
And
sir.
also use the market manager again, just to go back to that, and find them when you get there and say, who has the cheapest carrots? I need cheap carrots, or whatever, you know. I have definitely fallen and prey to buying a cabbage for $3 a head and walked into the next stand and seen one for $1 a head. So you just have to shop around. Yeah.
Yeah, which is another advantage of shopping direct versus going to a grocery store. Is there's actually room for a type of haggling. I mean, you know, where you're looking for a product. I mean, you can't really, you know, where you say, you know, I'm looking for tomatoes for making sauce. They don't have to be perfect. You can't do
Right.
that in a grocery store. Yes, the gentleman in the blue.
The preceding panel brought up the problem of the waste that people see. We've seen that what you just said of marketing and the cost difference and getting people to understand what's in it has to figure in. I'm wondering how you tell people, no, you use less of better, you know, and not an equivalent thing. And I'm wondering if there's a difference in marketing as Americans have been inundated with other things produced from elsewhere, and don't think you have to produce anything here, and don't understand it. So I'm wondering if the equivalent thing that to get manufacturing again here is a similar problem that you have with selling local produce, of getting people to understand why it's important.
Again, from a coffee perspective, a challenge we face, I guess there's two parts to this answer. One is there's an interesting thing going on in coffee right now. The markets that fundamentally set the price for the trade of coffee worldwide have been ridiculous over the last year and a half or so. And to give you an idea, if coffee was trading at about $1.20 on the commodities exchange here in New York City, there's a lot that goes into that number, so don't think it's a clean $1.20 a pound. But anyway, $1.20, just to give you an idea, just at the end of last week, it was almost $3. So that's well over 100% increase in about a year's time. It's been in the press. The good side of that, I think, is that we're seeing there is certain price point sensitivity in the market. So as much as I sit up here and preach about, you know, you want a great cup of coffee, pay for it. You guys might be like, yeah, whatever, John. Sure, fine. I still only have this much in my budget. I'm watching my pennies, you know, and I appreciate that. Other roasters do too. And so roasters are being forced to start offering smaller packaging sizes. So you're going to see that packages go, coffee's always been traded by the pound in this country. People have shifted to 12-ounce packages. I've seen 8-ounce packages. In the commercial side of the business, people like Folgers and Maxwell House really look at the weights. They're all over the map. You see everything from like 9.7 ounces to, you know, 8.3 ounces. It's completely bizarre. But in the specialty side of the business, you do see people shifting to more of a 12-ounce size. On the flip side of that, though, you see Sam's, Costco, other Price Club type places, and they're selling cases, like 10 pounds a pop. So, you know, you're getting $4.99 special, you know, Liquidator's Delight. You know, you're seeing all kinds of stuff. So the market is fracturing even more to accommodate this time that we're going through. Does that help? Did that help answer the question? So, I mean, there is a less, but I guess on the marketing side of that, I guess that's more distribution and market dynamic side. From the marketing and messaging side, we've always told people coffee should be treated like bananas or tomatoes or other fresh produce. You should buy less and buy more often. So you should visit your local markets. You should visit, if you want to buy through a grocery store, fine, but don't buy 2 pounds, put half in the freezer of all places to take out at, you know, the holidays. Buy what you think you're going to consume in a week to 2 weeks period. Grind as you go. Put it in an airtight container, a cool, dry place, and buy as often as you can to keep it fresh.
We're almost out of time. I don't know if there's maybe one more question we'll take. Yes.
Have you read the recent article in New Yorker about bananas, the end of bananas? Eastern Hemisphere gone through Southwest, up to us. They don't know how to deal with it. If they can't, soon, 3 years, no bananas at any price. Nature is supreme in every way. One other thing about brands. Ray's Pizza, 11th in the New York, a finest pizza. Ray's, all of the stuff, no good. They have it. Low price. You buy it, undergraduate in the school, start, continue. Ray's 11th, you really get great pizza. Wonderful thing. You get to know what you buy, whatever you buy. Ray's all place, nothing like this Ray's Pizza. And nature stuff. The supremacy of nature.
I mean, I suppose, part of the point that's being made here is that marketing has to be a much bigger part of this food system that we're talking about. Sharing of information as opposed to withholding of information. I mean, if you get to know your local pizza shop, you know if it's true Rays or imitation Rays. And
I thought they were all the original Rays.
yeah, that's what it says. Any last comments from the panel? I know we have a reception where we'll have a chance, everyone will have a chance to speak to the panels a little bit more.
I would just echo Zaid's comments that we get excited about the food and the farm, and we get excited about production methodologies because they're kind of sexy and interesting to us. Unfortunately, as my company found, if you can't get the word out and tell people what you're doing and why it's interesting and what's compelling about that and what someone can relate to, they're not going to know you exist and they're not going to buy. And then, as the first folks said as well, in the end of the day, these are for-profit enterprises. If you can't find a consumer for all the great things that you're doing, your company will die. So bottom line is, at least we found we had to invest in marketing more than ever in this time.
Yeah.
And
same with us, marketing-wise. We just want the customer to speak up as much as possible. Talk to the market manager, talk to the farmer, tell them I would buy something here, but you don't have price signs up, or I would buy this product if you grew it, so maybe they'll grow it, or just constantly giving us feedback because we are always evolving and growing and responding to the marketplace.
well, thank you so much to our speakers.